Host of Redacted tonight in Moment of Clarity, Lee Camp.
Hey, man.
How you doing, buddy?
Good. Your hair is looking especially pointy there this today. It's very exciting.
Well, when it gets longer, the Count Chocula point gets more defined. So I'm due for a haircut.
I'm hoping for some good counting coming up.
I'm good. One government secret, two government secret. So fun show at the Dynasty Typewriter in Los Angeles.
Man, that was wonderful.
Yeah, that was our first ever live one. We had a nice little crowd there. It was a blast. For it being a Saturday afternoon and everything, it was fun to like hear people laughing at all of the shenanigans. So if you have not, there's no video of that show, everybody. You have to listen to it. It's an audio podcast.
You have to use the holes in the sides of your head.
Yes.
Specifically those holes. Don't experiment with other holes.
Don't take this show into a weird hole, I think is what
listen, I've said that from the beginning.
There's one thing we can leave with. Go ahead. Sorry.
We are specifically for the holes on the side, and sometimes the hole-like structures on the front of your face. But yeah, don't experiment past that, really.
Well, I mean, even then, like, don't snort government secrets through your nose. You know? Like,
you've heard about all these overdoses. That's what it is.
Actually, yeah, government secrets is actually fentanyl is a street name for government secrets. That's what.
Yep. It goes by fuck it all.
Yeah, we had a blast, and then we went out after the show, which was fun. It was good times. It was good times had by all. We hadn't seen each other.
Maybe we'll do that again one day.
I think at some point, whenever things open up, whenever that'll be in the year 2030 or something like that.
Whenever you and I are within, I'd say 5 to 6 time zones of each other, we're gonna do one of those shows.
Well, that's where we're gonna lock it down. Hopefully, we can do a show in New York City before it is underwater.
We just did our LA show before it burns down.
So we're gonna try to get New York City and Miami before they're evacuated. So those will be fun.
Yeah.
We were going to do an Australian tour, but it looks like the police are just rounding people up willy-nilly. So I don't think we're going to go down there just yet. Things are getting exciting around the world. So maybe if there's a comedy club in Costa Rica, we could.
If it's still above ground, then yeah.
They don't have a military in Costa Rica.
Yeah, I don't know. The monkeys are pretty vicious. I don't know if you've ever been, but
yes, I have. They are vicious. Well, this is, ladies and gentlemen, Government Secrets episode, and I checked beforehand. 57. Beep, beep, beep. Bum, 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 bum.
I feel like the last one was 57.
No, I just checked. The live show is 56.
Okay.
I literally went to that Google Doc that we have that I never look at.
You got it. You're correct. 50. Yeah, we're on 57.
I told you, dude. I checked.
Well done. I'm impressed.
And I actually, because I wanted to double check the one I'm doing today. Hadn't been. I was like, this guy. Have I done this one before? I couldn't tell, so I double checked. And then I was like, saw all this wonderful stuff in this Google Doc that I haven't looked at in ever.
You're like, somebody's been in it. I don't know who, but
wow, this is neat. I wonder who did all this. This is crazy.
This is neat. There's like topics and things. It says what we did in the past. You know, I remember there was that awkward time where you did the Truth About Santa Claus 3 episodes in a row. And it was just a little weird.
And even on the side is the jokes, the like running jokes from each. I was like, oh, that's right. Yeah. So it's really, Lee,
it takes a village to run the things that you don't know how they're running.
It takes a village to run a thing that you are half a part of that you don't know how it's done. That is the thing that it's Yeah, it was like, and I got to tell you, I am now sold on this Google Docs. Boy, they are efficiently.
They have you heard of these people, the Googles? They I feel you watch that stock. I bet that stock goes up.
I get in on the ground floor if I were
Yeah.
you, is what
Yeah.
I would do.
And nice thing about them, no connection to our government. So
No, none
Yeah.
at all. No,
Yeah.
Eric Schmidt hasn't been working with the CIA since 2011. There's no evidence of that, other than a lot of evidence. But other than that,
Other than all of the evidence that I'm holding right here, there is no evidence.
Kate, our moderator, just put in the chat, Graham has never held a desk job. That is correct, Kate. That's why I do not know how things like Google Docs work. Fun fact. I've been a comedian since I was 18. I have no marketable skills. I would not know how to function in any sort of office environment. I've had like writing jobs for like TV shows or whatever. That's the closest I've come to a real job.
And how many times did they have to tell you to put your nipples away?
Oh, there was just a big sign, Graham, cover your nipples, just when you walked in. And everybody touched it when they walked in.
Well, yeah, that's it. So yeah, if you count comedy shows, obviously I write and kind of produce Redacted Tonight, so I definitely have a desk job. A lot of times sitting at a desk, but I've never had a desk job with the exception of like it was like a 2 or 3 month period where I was like a temp for, and I would just come in for like 4 hours and they would just have me brainlessly like input stuff into computers. And so I was doing stand up at night in New York City. So other than that 3 months, I've never had a desk job that wasn't like writing a comedy show.
Which is like still not really. I mean, it's kind of a desk job, but it is still.
When people say desk job, they mean work that you hate, I think.
Yeah. Going to a job that you hate, working on crap you could not care less about, but you have to do it correctly so you don't want to get fired.
Yeah.
I've never had
capitalism.
AKA capitalism. I worked at a Dunkin' Donuts in high school, cleaning out the deep fat fryers. And when my buddy and I got fired, we cheered. I had that job for 2 weeks.
How does one get fired from cleaning out the deep fat fryers?
I think we just no showed. Was
it simply the boss showing up and being like, there is still deep fried fat in here. What is going on around these places?
Elwood.
And you're like, I'm supposed to clean that out. I chose not to.
It was that. I'll never forget. We had to do that and then like clean out the garbage cans, like empty the garbage cans. And I remember like in the actual front of the actual shop, they usually didn't let us come up front because they just wanted us little rats in the back, but we had to come, and there was a cop having a donut talking to the guy behind the donut counter. And this cop who looked like he was probably in his like his 40s or something like that. He looked very old and not happy. He was just sitting there drinking coffee. And he's like, yeah, high school, those are the best days of my life. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, I hate high school. I can't wait to get out of this. And that's what I got to look forward to.
Yeah.
So
dude, I every day of my life after high school, no matter how bad it was, I thought at least this isn't high school.
Yeah, I know. At least I'm not in high school.
Yeah,
I'm not in high school.
You could
anymore.
be worse. You could be in high school. People who enjoyed high school really bother me.
I mean,
it's like someone, saying just everything in life's been fine.
There was aspects of it that were kind of fun, but for the most part, it just was awful. It was just awful. High school's awful. Just like it was no fun at all. Other than cleaning out deep fat fryers, that was fun.
Yeah, that's always a good time.
And then in college, I had a job as security guards for the football and basketball games, just because I wanted to watch the games for free. And then I started running scams in college, and that was on my path to being a comedian.
What was a classic Graham scam? What kind of Graham scams are we talking?
Well, I was a security guard for the University of Arizona, where I went to college, was is a big basketball school. When I was there in the late 80s, early 90s, they had a team that was like consistently good. Like we made it to the Final Four. So it was always a sellout. The home games were always a sellout. It was like a 12,000 seat arena. It wasn't like a 20. It was in Tucson. So we had jobs as security guards, just like ushers basically. And me and one of my roommates, Pete DiMartini. Pete.
He's crazy. That guy.
Pete, still friends with Pete. No, it was in Long Island, and we became friends with a ticket scalper named Gino. And so we worked out a deal with him. We're like, we'll sell your guys some standing room only tickets, and we'll get a taste. So he sold the standing room only tickets for like $10 each, and we got $5. We split it with him, and we would basically just walk these guys in some back door and just stand around. You're in the arena standing room.
Here's your standing room ticket. It's just a back door. They're like, why are we going through the kitchen? They're like, what?
Don't worry about it.
Why am I next to a nacho vat? And you were like, this is where they keep the deep fat fryers. I know this place inside and out. I know all the deep fat fryers in this whole city. You follow me. You can get access to any kitchen underneath a stadium you want.
It's just like we had that. I ran a bunch of other scams. Some of them.
This is standing room only.
This is standing room only. And they're like, okay, like, do we get an actual physical ticket? Nah. And it was like, what happens if the ushers ask us? They won't, because we know all the ushers. Like, you're good. Don't worry about it. Just stand in our section and you'll be fine. I had dozens of those scams, dozens of that kind of shit.
It's amazing. And it's tough to say whether it's really a scam if they got to watch the game. Then
who got hurt?
Yeah, who got hurt?
They got to watch the game. I'm sure they bought some concessions, so the school made a little bit of money.
The school got a taste.
The school you got to just give as long as everybody's beak gets a little wet, Lee. Nobody's got to get angry about anything.
As long as everybody's beak is wet, then we're all fine.
This is I was such a con man. I was such a little hustler. I remember I had a job when I moved to LA. My buddy Walker had a job doing AV at this really nice hotel, right? So people, when an office or a company rents out one of the big conference rooms, and you'd set up projectors or whatever like that. So he set up the AV for that, and he just hired me because I was funny. I was the worst employee he's ever had, and he tells the story to this day of, and I was dead serious, and this is my response. He goes, "Hey man." So this is in the 90s, so they were still using. He goes, "Hey man, so I got to ask you this. One of the VCRs is like unaccounted for. Did you take it or sell it or something like that?" I said, "No, man." And I said, "If I did, I'd cut you in." Come on, what's right is right. I'm not an asshole, Lee.
Which reminds me, here's $25 for the television.
The printer's gone, but here's a little something for you. You know what I mean?
Hey, here's $20. The guy really likes your shoes. He's really loving them.
It's like, I wasn't offended that he thought I stole it. I was offended that he thought I wouldn't cut him in. Like, come on, like let's just. I'm a smart businessman.
What do you think I am? Some kind of fucking con artist?
Yeah.
What are you, a low life?
Come on, that's why would I bite the hand that feeds me? Maybe we run a scam where a lot of VCRs go missing. That's all I'm saying.
Apparently, all scam artists in the 1980s talked in like a 1930s, like fucking prohibition era slang. Here's what we're gonna do. See, I'm gonna cut you in on a little. Hey. We're gonna wet your beak, buddy.
I'm not gonna be a cold flipper here. I'm gonna give you a little slide of the salad, if you know what I'm talking about.
If I heard that now, I would assume the guy was trying to blow me. I'd be like, all right, just back off. There's no flippers here.
I think I made a lot of those terms up, but sure, it would probably assume the guy was trying to blow you. And if you guys were to, I'm not judging anybody's lifestyle. If you were to do that sort of transaction, again, as long as I got a little taste, I wouldn't mind. You know what I mean? I'm not going to be
a little taste in this scenario is,
very leading.
Yeah, very leading.
So yeah, that's my grifter days. That's why now I'm a YouTube comedian, which is basically just another grift.
Yeah, it's one grift to another. You did the game show grift, and now you're on to the fucking YouTube personality grift and the
What's next? Speaking of grifts, everybody, you can support the show by going to liberapay.com/government secrets.
That's the best segue I've ever heard.
It's for real though. We finally got the LiberaPay. Well, I finally figured it out to get it set up because I came into so many roadblocks. It's a little, and then when I come into roadblocks like that, it feels like real work, and I can't do it. That's
I'm actually kind of close to that, although I didn't have any trouble setting one up a while back. But so apparently you and I have different bars on this kind of thing. But it is true that it is true that like the moment it starts to look like paperwork or computer work or something, my eyes glaze over, and then I get drowsy, and then my head hits the desk, and I'm knocked unconscious.
I'm just like, oh, what the fuck now? Like, I'm just like, what? I'm just like immediately exacerbated. I'm immediately like some dad of 5, whose kids are fighting in the back of his minivan. Like, what now? I love a mic. Would you guys pipe down? Like, no, you just.
I very much relate to it's an old Bill Burr joke about, he said, I think of killing myself sometimes, but never over anything big. It's just like, I'm at the DMV and I've waited in line for an hour. And then she's like, do you have this paperwork and this paperwork? And then I think like, what if I just jumped up really high and cut my head off on the ceiling fan right now? Like, what if I just did that instead? Because that sounds better right now than dealing with this paperwork.
I know. Actually, you need to refill this form out and then submit it, and then you're just like, oh, then I would like completely blow my head off.
If I had a gun on me when I'm asked for second proof of address, then I would use it every time without fail.
That's your Second Amendment loophole for
dude. Whenever I'm trying to, it's not that often, but whenever I'm trying to do something at the bank, and I think I've got every piece of paperwork they could ever ask for, and then they're like, well, what's the name of the ex-wife of the person you're sending the money to, and what is her previous address? And I'm like, what the fuck? How could you?
There's no way I'm going to find that information. Or like a website where it's like, just upload this and it's done. And then you won't upload and the wheel just spins or something, or it says it didn't get it. It's the wrong file size. And I'm just like, you're the wrong file size, motherfucker. Like,
how many fists did you put through computer screens during like the early 2000s when it was just endless spinning wheels?
Oh,
the hourglass.
It's so great. The computers are making our lives, are they? But folks, go to liberapay.com/government secrets and support what we're doing. So Graham's microwave is stuck on 12 flashing. How do you know that? That's rude to just make that kind of accusation about me.
Do you have a camera?
Yes, I just like knowing it's always noon or midnight.
I do remember when that was a big deal. People would always talk about how our VCR is stuck. Like, it was a big joke of the 90s. It was like, VCR is stuck flashing 12. Because literally, like, your average human being could not deal with setting the clock or even most of the VCR at all. And now look at us. It's like a fucking 4-year-old is, posting TikTok videos.
Just beep, beep, beep. Just snapping at everything, running Nassau. All right, well, let's, would you want to do yours first? Or should we do mine's the lighter one?
So we want lighter first or second?
Well, how heavy is yours? Are we going to need like an aperitif after like a really intense? Is it one of those ones where it's like we got to talk about something silly?
I do feel like I have to start giving Graham a trigger warning on these. It does feel like it's starting to get to you. It's a little dark, but I think we'll have moments of levity. But it's about the truth about Robert E. Lee.
Oh, your namesake. Well, then let's do that first, Lee. This is. I want to know the dark secret of your namesake.
No, actually, that's the interesting thing. It's all positive. He was just a fucking stellar guy, and government secret. Fucking good dude. Didn't even he knew he was leading the Confederacy, but he didn't know why they were fighting. He was just like, yeah, I'll lead it. It's like someone, just says, come to a party and then you show up and everybody's wearing like hoods with little holes cut out for the eyes, white hoods. And you're like, oh, it just seemed like a fun outfit.
Is this like a cosplay for ghosts?
Yeah. Ghost cosplay. Yeah.
Ghost cosplay.
Yeah. No, that is not the truth. So Robert E. Lee, yes, my namesake. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. For those who don't know, the capital of the Confederacy. And for those of you in other countries, we had a bit of a tiff between two sides of our country back in the 1860s. We're over it now. Totally fine.
Done. Yeah, it's good. Smooth sailing. No problems.
Smooth sailing.
United.
Bit of a tiff. Killed hundreds of thousands. So yeah. Also, I'm related to him. I'm also related to non-Confederacy people like George Washington and shit. But
what? It's. I forget that you have this like crazy like.
I think the last time I brought it up, you said the same thing. You're like, I forget that you have these bizarre.
I always like, because when we just talk and do the show, I'm like, oh, there's my buddy Lee, and then I was like, what? He's related to like Betsy Ross's thumb thing or whatever, that needlepoint thing. I don't know.
Yeah. I have her her needlepoint in my house.
You're related to George Washington and Robert E. Lee, or you're just named after Robert E. Lee?
No, so here's the thing, is back in the day, the oligarchy was even smaller than it is now. So these people were often related to each other. So Washington and Robert E. Lee were related, or they were connected via marriage. I don't know how, I don't actually know the years, so I don't know. They didn't overlap at all, but I just mean via marriage they were connected. Anyway, so the most direct line that my family is from is the Custis line, which was Washington's wife, and then John Marshall. So my older brother's named Marshall, and my father's middle name is Marshall, and so the John Marshall family, fourth Supreme Court justice, for the fourth Supreme Court justice and Chief Justice, and so we're connected to that family, and then we're also connected to Lewis and Clark, so that's my brother's name. So
what? Shut the fuck up! You can't be connected to all these guys. This is like, I'm related.
We have Nellie. So Nellie Washington was George Washington's niece, and we have her hand towel in our house.
That's right. I remember that. I remember Eleanor saying that.
Because back in those days, hand towels were a little more rare, and this is a really nice one. And so she signed it probably to make sure that it would keep being brought back to her when it was washed and things.
Now, is that framed, or you guys just have it in the downstairs bathroom?
Well, I use it for when my my ass crack gets itchy. So yeah, it does great for that.
So you have the ass of a patriot.
Yeah. No, it's framed. Wow. But then the name, then my favorite one, I think the only one people really care about, is the godfather. Maybe we'll do a government secret segment on this one time. The grandfather of American football was a Yale coach named Walter Camp, and he's like my great grandfather or something.
So you have ties to Washington, the guy who created American football, and Robert E. Lee.
You forgot Lewis and Clark.
Lewis.
So it's actually just Lewis, and Lewis, I think, and I haven't actually read up on him that much, but I think he ended up killing himself. So and had a pretty rough go of it. So it didn't end well for Lewis.
Well, he was the funny one.
It was pretty hilarious. Yeah.
So, I mean, for real, are you in the Skull and Bones? Is that why they won't pull you off the air? Is because the Illuminati's like, he's protected. Let him say whatever he wants. Is it like
no? This many, when you're 150 years removed, you end up with a lot of duds on the family line. So we're not. My dad's family was pretty poor. his father was a door-to-door salesman. Like it's not the money does not filter down that far.
Okay.
Nor the schooling. I went to UVA. None of us went to Yale.
All right, but does UVA have a secret society that you were in?
They do have secret societies. I was in none of them.
All right, Lee.
But that's what I'd say if I were in them. No.
Oh, this is awesome. Every
Anyway.
time we do this, it gets deeper and deeper. This is the true government secret, is Lee's bloodline. Mine just obviously goes back to just a bunch of grifters and con artists. That's all. That's what mine goes back to, just train robbers and horse thieves or whatever the fuck is in mine.
Graham, this is why we're the perfect duo for this show. We're calling out the grifters in the oligarchy. So it's perfect.
It is very fitting. Okay, so back to the loving, fun history of Robert E. Lee. So,
and the reason this matters is that a lot of people, there's been a lot of recreation of Lee's like life, who he is and everything. There's been a big transformation over the years since the Civil War of crafting this idea of him as this kindly, very, noble general who, yes, led the Southern forces, but didn't really want to. And, he was asked to, this part is true. He was asked to be the general for both sides, both the Union and the Confederacy. And he chose the Confederacy because he said he couldn't fight against his family. And so it's this idea that like, it also, they use this to craft a fake story about the entire Southern cause, as if all the people fighting, including the soldiers and everyone who made the decisions to break away from the Union, were doing it because they didn't. It wasn't about slavery. It was just like they wanted, states' rights, and they couldn't fight against their brothers, and so there was nothing. That was all it was. We were just trying to help each other out,
Yeah, we just want to defend our rights. We're just working class people. We just want our right. We don't want our rights taken away.
Right. So. And I'm getting this from an article in The Atlantic, which is quoting several well-known historians. But the myth of Lee goes something like this. He was a brilliant strategist and devoted Christian man who abhorred slavery and labored tirelessly after the war to bring the country back together. There's little truth to this. Lee was a devout Christian, and historians, which in my view is a strike against him, and historians regard him as an accomplished tactician, but even on that front, it's arguable because despite his ability to win individual battles, his decision to fight a conventional war against the more densely populated and industrialized North is considered by many historians to have been a fatal strategic error. So the military prowess thing is arguable, whatever, even if you concede that point, even if you go, okay, great tactician. Well, let's move on. Even if you conceded that, he would still be responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Americans in defense of the South's authority to own millions of human beings as property because they are Black. Lee's elevation as a key part of a 150-year-old propaganda campaign designed to erase slavery as the cause of the war and whitewash the Confederate cause as a noble one. That ideology is known as the lost cause, and as historian David Blight writes, it provided a foundation on which Southerners built the Jim Crow system. So, I mean, you've heard this. I don't. You grew up where? Chicago?
In Wisconsin and in Chicago.
Wisconsin. And what kind of history did you get about Lee?
Oh, I don't know. They're just all a bunch of hillbillies down there that over the weeks.
Okay, you weren't listening in history class. I'll take it as that.
I was running a scam. I was
in third grade. You were busy. I would sell these standing room only tickets to the classroom, and it was to do kids, and then they'd get in there and realize there was no charge to just sit in a desk.
Yeah, but they didn't know. We told them you were getting VIP seats. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was just we were just told that it was mainly. I had some relatives that lived in the South, and they would kind of say some of this stuff that you're talking about. I think this was more taught in the South, that like giving Robert E. Lee this more favorable sort of historical coverage. Whereas in the North, it was pretty much like, yeah, the South wanted to own slaves, and the North said this is wrong, and Abraham Lincoln said you can't do this, and so that's why the Civil War happened. Was sort of the broad strokes that I remember being taught about the Civil War. So I've never remember hearing anything about Robert E. Lee being painted in an overly positive light. He was never demonized. I'll say that. He was never like looked at like this big awful guy the way, Hitler and Mussolini were taught in my history classes. But
right.
He definitely wasn't lauded in any way.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember, I don't know that they didn't necessarily like teach us like, oh yeah, the war was definitely not fought about slavery, but they kind of glossed over the slavery thing. And then they would say all these positive things. This is in Richmond, Virginia, where literally my high school was named after the Confederate rebels. It was, I think I mentioned this on a previous show. It's Douglas Freeman High School, which he was kind of the propagandist for the Confederacy to some degree, a writer, a journalist. And so it's named after him. And then it was the Confederate rebels was the mascot until they became just the rebels. And then I think they maybe changed it recently to the Mavericks or something. But yeah. Just recently, like in the last year. Oh, and the other reason this story is important right now is because they finally took down the largest Robert E. Lee statue in the nation, which is in Richmond, Virginia, Monument Avenue. So yeah.
I mean, when I moved, so Madison, Wisconsin, where I lived till I was about 11, is a very sort of white liberal college town. So there's no way they would have been like revering the South. And then when I moved, when I was just before my 12th birthday, I moved to Evanston, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago, and it's been integrated since the late 1800s. And so, like when I was in the 80s, we had Black History Month, and we celebrated Martin Luther King Day before it was ever even considered a national holiday. So there's no way that high school would have been like, yeah, Robert E. Lee, man, he did all right.
Right.
There's no way.
On the other hand, when I was growing up in Richmond, Virginia, in the 90s, it was still, they refused to give his own day to MLK. So they combined it into one big day called Lee Jackson King Day. Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, and MLK all on the same day. Like two guys who fought for slavery and MLK. We're going to celebrate those at the same time.
Wow.
They only changed that like 10 years ago or something. So to make the point about how this idea of General Lee as this positive, very sweet guy, very noble, continues to be pushed to this day. In the Richmond Times-Dispatch, David Cox wrote that, quote, for white supremacist protesters to invoke Robert E. Lee's name violates Lee's most fundamental convictions, unquote. In the conservative publication Town Hall, they wrote, Lee was among the finest human beings that has ever walked the earth. John Daniel Davidson in The Federalist opposed the removal of the Lee statue in Richmond, I believe, in part on the grounds that Lee, quote, arguably did more than anyone to unite the country after the war and bind up its wounds. So praise for Robert E. Lee as this wonderful guy continues today. And that was all those quotes are from either this year or last year. So to continue from the Atlantic, this is too divorced from Lee's actual life to even be classed as fan fiction. It is simply historical illiteracy. White supremacy does not violate Lee's most fundamental convictions. White supremacy was one of Lee's most fundamental convictions. Like straight up, Lee was a slave owner. His own views on slavery were explicated in the 1856 letter that is often misquoted to give the impression that Lee was some kind of abolitionist. In the letter, he describes slavery as a moral and political evil. So people will take that quote and say, look, he was an abolitionist. But if you continue to read, it says, quote, I think it, however, a greater evil to the white man than to the black race. Yes, slavery is worse for the white man than for the black race. And
it is so hard. being a rich white guy owning slaves. You have no idea the trauma that is.
Listen, I'm still hurt by it to this day. To continue, he said, and while my feelings are strongly enlisted in behalf of the latter, meaning the white, meaning his feelings are strongly enlisted for the black race, my sympathies are maybe strong for the white race. The blacks are immeasurably better off here in Africa. They're better off being our property than in Africa. They're better off here than in Africa, morally, socially, and physically. The painful discipline they are undergoing is necessary for their instruction as a race, and I hope will prepare and lead them to better things. How long their subjugation may be necessary is known and ordered by a wise, merciful providence. Their emancipation will sooner result from the mild and melting influence of Christianity than the storms and tempests of fiery controversy. Did you gather that? Don't rise up and stop slavery. Jesus will do it over time.
Yet again, more evidence that Christianity and white supremacy are very much tied together. Like
they use it like a tool. It's one of their favorite tools in their toolbox.
I'm really glad we did this segment first, because this letter is like not as horrific as like Columbus's diary, but it's right up there. And it's good though that this letter is out there. So now this is good. This is for you, for me, for everybody watching and listening to this. If anyone on social media is like quotes the Robert Lee said slavery was immoral, get the rest of this letter, put it on their Facebook page, and just let them read it and go, no, he was a monster, and his statue should be torn down.
And also, I think some people, when they hear this stuff, they go, well, that was the times, that was a common belief for the times. Yeah. You know what else was common for the times? There were a lot of people then who did not have fucking slaves. There were a lot of people then who were against slavery. There were a lot of people then who may not have been against it enough to run around saying end slavery, but were against it enough to be like, yeah, that's wrong.
Yeah, that's why, you know what else was popular at the time? A group called the abolitionists. So like who were vocally in direct opposition of people like Robert E. Lee and his horrifically racist, white supremacist Christian beliefs, that the black man is better off. Because it's so much better to be owned by someone and beaten by them and forced into work than just live off the land with your family and do what you'd like, be life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness back in your home country.
Listen, they're so much better off as our slaves than in Africa free, even though half of them died, or maybe more than that, in the commute between Africa and here, because they'd lock them down in the hold and never let them out. Even though half of them died on the way, they're just better off here. They're just having a lot of fun. Honestly, it's a good time.
It's like the epitome of white privilege. Like it is the summit of white privilege. Like I don't even know. And that they say this like with, and they're 100% sincere when they say this. No, I remember a friend of mine that I went to high school with went to college in the South, and he was telling me like, wow, the perception, and this is this kind of crap. And, he was in some history class in college. He went to college, I think, and it was my friend went to Clemson in South Carolina. And someone in his class was like, no, the slave owners, they love their slaves. They, it wasn't a mean thing. It was like,
they treated them really well. Yeah.
They don't understand. You're owning a human being is wrong. And it's actually, Jesus wouldn't have done that. So let's
hold on. Ask his slaves. Ask Jesus' slaves how well he treated them.
Right, exactly. It's a great point.
So you mentioned that there were abolitionists in that time. Probably the best known abolitionist maybe ever was John Brown. And John Brown led a revolt to free slaves. And he, in some ways, maybe it was one of the most successful ones of the time. Like he expected he expected far more than he ultimately got, but he did get a bunch of. He thought that every plantation he showed up to, they'd just all join him, and then you'd have an army that could win battles. But of course, many slaves are a crazy white dude shows up and says, "Follow me," and not all of them were like, "Yeah, this sounds like a good plan." So, but he did get dozens of both some white folks, but a lot of slaves to join him in this revolt to end slavery, and eventually they were kind of cornered. They were trapped in a farmhouse or something, a barn, basically. Many of them had already been shot or wounded, and it was, in a lot of ways, it was a bloodbath, and they're kind of stuck there with hostages and shit like that. And Graham, I will give you one chance to guess the general who was brought in to capture John Brown.
Oh, God, boy. Let me think.
Mad Dog Mattis.
Petraeus. Was Petraeus before he started keeping secrets at his girlfriend's apartment?
You're close. Jean-Luc Picard.
Engage. And that's what he said. I don't know. I'm going to just wild guess. Was it Robert E. Lee?
God, Graham, nothing gets past you. Nothing gets by you. Robert E. Lee, a young strapping, I don't know how young he was. Robert E. Lee was brought in to end the John Brown slave rebellion and captured him. Of course, John Brown then tried in one of those super fair trials and hanged. But many of the people with John Brown were just shot and killed on the spot. But anyway, that was a side note. That wasn't even in the article. I was just throwing that in there if anyone wanted to know.
Yeah.
So after that quote from Robert E. Lee that he wrote about Christianity was going to solve slavery over time, but of course that didn't mean he was going to give away his slaves. So he was like, it hasn't solved it for me personally yet, but I'm sure one day Christianity will tell me to free my slaves. But right now, I think it's working great. So the article adds that Black people might not want to be slaves does not enter into Lee's equation. Their opinion on the subject of their own bondage is not even an afterthought in the quote, the article by Lee. Lee's cruelty as a slave master was not confined to physical punishment. Lee ruptured the Washington and Custis, that's the line I'm from, the Washington and Custis tradition of respecting slave families by quote unquote respecting slave families. Obviously, it's not respect if they're slaves. So let's not pretend that they're being respected. But the way it was discussed back then to respect a slave family was to keep the family together. Because listen, if we're going to fucking destroy their lives and make them miserable and make them our property, let's at least let them be with their children, parents, etc. But Lee didn't do that. Lee did not follow the family tradition of doing that. He hired slave families off to different plantations. And by 1860, he had broken up every family but one on his estate, some of whom had been together since Mount Vernon days. The separation of slave families was one of the most unfathomably devastating aspects of slavery. It's tough to even comprehend, wrap your head around the horror that is. You're already a slave, but you've been in that for so many years that it's kind of tough to probably imagine anything outside of it. It's just the horror show that is your life. But then to have your kid stolen and sold off is like a whole other new level of tragedy. Lee's heavy hand on the Arlington, Virginia plantation nearly led to a slave revolt, in part because the enslaved had been expected to be freed upon their previous master's death. And Lee had engaged in a dubious legal interpretation of his will in order to keep them as his property, one that lasted until a Virginia court forced him to free them. So Lee's, I believe it was his father-in-law, gifted, these people die and they give their estates away or whatever. And so I think Lee got his estate or got a lot of his estate or something with his wife. But it said in the will that his father-in-law's slaves would be freed upon his death. And the slaves knew that. That'd been discussed with them. Once I die, you're free. And then he dies, and Lee takes ownership and says, "No, never mind. You're just mine. You're mine now." Graham, here's where you add in, a little comical interlude. Here's where you make it all funny, Graham.
I hope, did Lee die at the end of the war? At least, is that something we can look forward to in this? I forget to spoil on this.
Lee does not die, Graham. Bad news.
Oh God. I'm literally, while you're saying this, I'm literally thinking, God, if I had a time machine, I would go back and wipe so many of these assholes out. And I think I was like, if I could only go back, like someone said, there's one time you can go back to one era. What would it be? Would I do this one? Or would I like go back and take out the CIA so they can't kill JFK?
Right.
Just to see what like this modern world would look like today. I don't know what. I don't know. It's a tough one. Do you go back and kill Hitler?
It's a tough call. Yeah. What time machine maneuver would save the most people or free the most people? Or
right.
Yeah.
Right. There's a really good history book called What If that always takes big historical events and asks what happens if whatever, Washington didn't win the Battle of Valley Forge or some key historical event like that, what would happen? If you're a history buff, it's a great book. But yeah, I'd like to know what would happen if I could just go back in time.
So what you were saying is, while I was reading that, you were just picturing yourself with a machine gun in 1860 gunning down slave owners.
Yeah, I think so. Pretty much. I think is what I was doing.
All right. Just wanted to.
So I didn't have any like jokes locked and loaded. I was just like, I
was like, that'd be interesting, killing all those people.
Or would I go kill Dulles? You know what I mean? He's come up in so many of our stories, but I just go kill Robert.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you could get both the Dulles brothers, that'd be, like a twofer. Yeah.
Oh man, like just they're out golfing or something, and you just boom, boom, like take them out.
So, in terms of like these people that say that slavery was not the real cause that the Confederacy seceded, every state that seceded in their secession statement mentioned slavery as the cause in their declaration. So, for those who think it wasn't slavery, every one of them mentioned slavery.
Every single one.
During the invasion of Pennsylvania, Lee's Army of Northern Virginia enslaved free Black Americans and brought them back to the South as property. So they were grabbing free Black men and making them property, which is different than just what Lee was saying in his earlier letter about like, oh, well, we have slavery and it's just here and we want it to end, but, Jesus has to do it one day. This is him and his soldiers actively grabbing free Black men and enslaving them. The historian Pryor, I don't have his first name, but Pryor writes that evidence links virtually every infantry and cavalry unit in Lee's army to the abduction of free Black Americans with the activity under the supervision of senior officers. And, that kind of decision as to whether to enslave people as you're fighting these battles was dictated by senior officers, and meaning it went to the top. Like if Lee had said that wasn't going to be done, it wouldn't have been done.
Right. Yeah, he wasn't this like noble peacemaker that just had to do his duty, but he loved, freedom and wanted to free the slaves. No, he was awful.
Right. And it wasn't like he turned around and he was like, what are you doing with all those Black people? Wait a second. You didn't grab all those and bring them home as your own. Guys.
Wait a minute. This war was about slavery? Nobody said a word to me about this when they hired me.
Who was in charge of that memo? Because that memo did not get out. Soldiers under Lee's command at the Battle of the Crater in 1864 massacred Black Union soldiers who tried to surrender. Then, in a spectacle hatched by Lee's senior corps commander, the Confederates paraded the Union survivors through the streets of Petersburg to the slurs and jeers of the Southern crowd. Lee never discouraged any of this behavior. This part I found particularly, interesting. Lee proposed an exchange of prisoners with the Union general, Ulysses S. Grant. Grant agreed on the condition. So both sides, at this point, both sides have, I don't know, hundreds probably of prisoners, maybe even thousands of prisoners that they've captured. And they're largely just sitting in prisons or on prison sites or whatever. Like, maybe they're putting them to work, but basically just sitting around. And Lee desperately needs troops. And so Lee proposes, let's exchange the prisoners. We'll give you yours. You'll give us ours, 1 for 1. Grant agreed on the condition that black soldiers be exchanged the same as white soldiers. Lee's response was, quote, Negroes belonging to our citizens are not considered subjects of exchange and were not included in my proposition. And now this is back to the author, because slavery was the cause for which Lee fought, he could hardly be expected to easily concede, even at the cost of the freedom of his own men, to concede that black people could be treated as soldiers and not as things, not as property. Grant refused the offer, telling Lee that, quote, government is bound to secure to all persons received into her armies the rights due to soldiers, unquote. Despite its desperate need for soldiers, the Confederacy did not relent on this position until a few months before Lee's surrender. So, despite how much they desperately needed soldiers, Lee would not step back on the idea that black people are just property.
Wow.
After the war, so this is another thing people point to as Lee did the most to heal the country. After the war, and Graham, for you wondering about whether Lee gets killed, no, he eventually surrenders, and they at Appomattox Courthouse, he and Grant sit down and sign the terms of surrender. After the war, Lee did advise. Oh, and by the way, since this goes back to the oligarchy. Since Lee is part of the oligarchy, and this is also not in the article, and many of these top generals were, after it's over, after they sign that surrender, and battles continue to go on to some degree, because it takes a while to get word around, and also some people just were like, fuck that, I'm still fighting. Yeah. But the oligarchy, like, these people don't get put in prison for leading a secession of the country, for like, this is a full-on traitorous, like we're leaving the country and fighting against the country, and none of them are put in prison. Like, it's just like, okay, we're done. Okay, enjoy your time on your estate.
And again, that's one of the reasons why this country is still so divided, why the South still has all of this racist policy, and why neo-Nazis and the Confederate flag and white nationalists are allowed to just continue on. I mean, that's also why, hey, we've talked about on this show, well, we brought Nazis here after World War II. Like, we've had this tolerance for this for way too long. And it's one of the things that is disintegrating this country. And it also speaks to
a lot of the Union. They weren't anti-racist,
right?
They were fine with being racist. They did not believe slavery should continue. So, like, even Abraham Lincoln had said there should not be slavery, but he didn't. He hadn't talked about. He didn't say, "I'm going to free the slaves," until it became evident that needed to happen in order for the Union to win the war.
Right.
He had to be pushed into that stance that he was going to free the slaves.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it also speaks to that. It's like, these people were the Confederacy was viewed as wrong for fighting against the Union and stuff, but it wasn't like, oh, these fucking racists. Like, they were fine with it. Most of the country was fine with racism.
Oh, yeah. Most of the country was racist. They're like, black people are second-class citizens, but they're not slaves. I mean, that was the big progressive thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After the war, Lee did advise defeated Southerners not to rise up against the North. So that's what people point to say he tried to heal the country. Lee might have Lee might have become a rebel on that cause. Like he might have been known for standing up for healing the country. But even in that task, Grant in 1866 regarded his former rival as falling short, saying that Lee was, quote, setting an example of forced acquiescence so grudging and pernicious in its effects as to be hardly realized. So Lee said, quietly said, don't rise up, and then did not do any effort to really heal the country.
Which again has kept that South will rise. You go if you're from the North and you go to the South for the first time, you go, Jesus, they're still talking about the Civil War here. Like it's, I thought it was, why no one's talking about this in the North, but that's part of it. I mean, he helped plant that seeds of the South will rise again, and why people still wave the Confederate flag. It's a part of our history. Oh, really? Are we waving the North Vietnamese flag around in this country? Like it's the dumbest fucking thing. It's so fucking stupid. Anyway, fuck Lee.
Also the Confederate battle flag, side note, didn't become popularized as like a thing to wave around until like the 1950s or something. It basically was brought back into favor in order to represent, we don't believe in black people getting civil rights.
Right. And
so people who still have the Confederate flag, they go, oh, it's about tradition. It's about the Civil War and how we still represent, I'm still proud of the South. And it's like, actually that flag, that emblem you're waving or you have on your bumper, it didn't become really a thing until literally black people were gaining civil rights. And then they were like, we need a symbol to say we're against civil rights for black people.
Let's pick this one. Let's pick the flag of a defeated army run by an evil asshole.
So the war, Lee insisted later that the war was not about slavery, but if it were about, oh yeah, this is great. He insisted it was not about slavery, but if it were about slavery, it was only out of Christian devotion that white Southerners fought to keep black people enslaved. It was only out of Christian devotion. Lee told a New York Herald reporter in the midst of arguing in favor of somehow removing black people from the South. He said that unless some humane course is adopted based on wisdom and Christian principles, you do a gross wrong and injustice to the whole Negro race in setting them free. And it is only this consideration that has led the wisdom, intelligence, and Christianity of the South to support and defend the institution up to this time. So we only support slavery because Christianity does. We don't actually like having slaves, is basically what he's saying. It's just our Jesus and our book of fairy tales that we hold here tells us to.
What are the countries that have digital nomad visas that I can move to? Do you have a list of them? Like just offhand, like I can just kind of start making because America's done, right? I mean, this podcast should be called Government Secrets. America's done, right? Like this is
Graham, you don't realize that I was actually hired to do this podcast to get you out of the country.
Well, tell your superiors you need a raise because you have done a fantastic job, League. I am so I was going to go to Australia. Turns out that's not a smart play. So I don't know. Maybe Portugal. Eu falo português pouco. They got good surfing. I think I'm going to go there.
So I'll try and speed it up here. I know we're running out of time, but in another, you only gave me an hour to go through the horrors of Robert E. Lee.
Who knew this was like a 4-parter?
So Lee, the Civil War finishes in 1865. Lee becomes president of Washington and Lee, the university, but he dies in 1870. So he's only around for like 5 years after the war. But during that time, he fought against white people hiring black people. He fought against black people getting the right to vote. In one letter, he wrote, quote, "You will never prosper with blacks, and it is abhorrent to a reflecting mind." Yeah, he did a lot of reflecting. to a reflecting mind to be supporting and cherishing those who are plotting and working for your injury, and all of whose sympathies and associations are antagonistic to yours. I wish them no evil in the world, he says. On the contrary, will do them every good in my power, and know that they are misled by those to whom they have given their confidence. But our material, social, and political interests are naturally with the whites. I love I will do them no evil in the world except fight to my dying breath to make sure they don't get a job or get the right to vote.
That's that's not evil. That's in his mind. It's just like somebody says all these awful things and then it ends it with, but no offense. Like,
yeah.
You're
listen,
a dumb.
You are a fucking cunt piece of shit. But no offense, I'm saying that in the best possible way.
And I mean you no harm. I wish you no evil, but other than like, I hope you die a fiery death, you fucking maggot-ridden bag of dog shit. But I mean you no evil, and I give you free reign to do your stupid nonsense in the dumbest way possible with your useless fucking shit-faced life. Go with God.
And bless your heart.
and bless your heart. Of course, bless your heart. That's a Southern fuck you. Got it.
Publicly, Lee argued against the enfranchisement of Black Americans and raged against Republican efforts to enforce racial equality in the South. Lee told, because the parties have kind of reversed. Republican basically used to be Democrat, but whatever. Right. They're both pieces of shit, so it doesn't really matter. Lee told Congress that Black people lacked the intellectual capacity of white people and, quote, could not vote intelligently. Yeah, white people really vote intelligently. And that granting...
I mean, to this day, we've had a great... They're just really stepping up and voting for fantastic people.
Yeah. And that granting them suffrage would, quote, excite unfriendly feelings between the two races. Yes, don't let Black people vote because that might cause racism.
Yeah, if you give people like equal rights, equal education, equal laws, allow them to vote, that's going to really piss them off that they're suddenly being treated fairly and equally with human dignity. Yeah, that's going to cause a big division if everybody's getting along.
So then this author goes on to say there were former Confederates who sought to redeem themselves, who, at the end of the war saw the error of their ways and really fought against what they had been. One example is James Longstreet, wrongly blamed by the Lost Causers for Lee's disastrous defeat at Gettysburg. So basically the people nowadays who are trying to act like the Civil War was a positive thing, hate James Longstreet because they wrongly blame him for something in order to tarnish his legacy. But James Longstreet, who went from fighting the Union Army against the Union Army to leading New Orleans' integrated police force, one of the first in the nation, in battle against white supremacist paramilitaries. So he went from basically fighting for the white supremacist army to fighting against the white supremacist paramilitaries. But there are no statues of Longstreet in New Orleans. Lee was devoted to defending the principle of white supremacy. Longstreet was not. This perhaps is why Lee was placed atop the largest Confederate monument of Gettysburg in 1917, also the largest in the world, which was in Richmond, Virginia. But the 6'2" Longstreet, meaning he was actually tall, had to wait until 1998 to receive a smaller scale statue hidden in the woods.
Here's your statue. Now, go down to follow that stream, go into the woods. It's going to be, you're going to see a stump. Okay,
and apparently it makes him look like a hobbit. I didn't see a photo, but it's like a tiny little statue and it looks like he's riding a donkey. But
oh God, this country gets dumber every time we do this show.
All right, here's the last paragraph, although I find this hilarious. The white supremacists who have protested on Lee's, he means modern day, on Lee's behalf, are not betraying their legacy, as many have, as that quote from the Richmond Times-Dispatch, my home newspaper, had said. The white supremacists who have protested on Lee's behalf are not betraying his legacy. In fact, they have every reason to admire him. Lee, whose devotion to white supremacy outshone his loyalty to his country, is the embodiment of everything they stand for. Tribe and race over country, is the core of white nationalism, and racists can embrace Robert E. Lee in good conscience. I find that ending hilarious. He's like, listen, racists out there, it is fine to love Robert E. Lee because he was totally racist.
Yeah, you love a racist because you're racist. He's your racist hero. When you're a dumb racist, you have a racist hero that's awful, and you'll take tribe over country. So you're not don't wave the American flag because you don't support what America stands for. You think you do, but you don't. Oh, that was a fantastic Robert E. Lee deluxe segment.
So, Graham, I'm sorry to take you from such a beloved, positive image of Robert E. Lee to the one you have now. I know I ruined your hopes and dreams.
Well, I forgot to do this on the live show, but since we need a palate cleanser, how about a Loch Ness Monster for Mayor of Atlanta stuffed animal that was given to me by a fan at our show in where were we? San Francisco. And you can see it has no spaceships, and then it says a mayor for Atlantis. So, folks, it's time to get Nessie on board. Nessie for mayor.
Nessie for mayor of Atlantis. I've long felt that.
This is so great. I get on stage when Ron and I did our first show in San Francisco, and this woman in the front row goes, here. And I was like, what is this? And I was like, oh my God, this is fantastic.
And Ron is also like, what the fuck?
Yeah, Ron's like, who's this? Why do you have a Loch Ness Monster for mayor? And I was like, the hat kind of falls apart. It didn't do well in my bag, but there's the hat, the mayor's hat. This is, Nessie.
If you sign up now at liberapay.com/government secrets, we will not actually be sending you that stuffed animal.
We won't be sending you this at all. I only have one of them.
No.
But maybe we should like autograph this and make this some like $1,000 tier or something like that. And but seriously,
we make an NFT out of Nessie for mayor.
Yes, that's what we do. We make an NFT. I'm down with that. But in all seriousness, folks, Nessie for mayor 2022. So please get on board because we need Nessie to
really do worse.
You can't. Well, I haven't done I've done a CIA operation. I've done a bunch of those. I haven't done a CIA project in a while, Lee.
Hey.
So
I don't know the difference, but yes. Let's do it.
This is so we've talked about Project MK Ultra before on this show and all of our shows. So one of the specific projects within Operation, actually it is an operation within Project MK Ultra was Operation Midnight Climax. And this
which is also what I would call date night.
This right. This was a good date. I would just call it that. Like, what's your goal for this date tonight? Midnight Climax. Operation Midnight Climax. So this was part of MK Ultra. When MK Ultra was doing a lot of LSD testing, they decided to then see if like drugs and sex and stuff would get people to give up state secrets or whatever. So the project started in 1954 consisted of a web of CIA-run safe houses in San Francisco and Mill Valley, California, and New York City. It was established in order to study the effects of LSD on consenting individuals.
The CIA is not good with consent.
No, they're not huge fans of it.
They don't have that training video that they showed at college, like boys. Here's what consent looks like.
No. Here's what the CIA's consent looked like: hiring prostitutes and then getting them to bring their Johns back to some CIA safe house, getting them full of LSD and trying to get him to talk.
Seriously?
That's what this operation was, in essence. I'll read the specifics of it. That's what they did. Again, our tax dollars hired prostitutes.
Dude, is there anything that ruins a boner more than that
I
situation?
know.
You
Like,
she brings you back to the room. There's 5 guys in like black ties and sunglasses being like, "Hey, welcome.
welcome. Whip it out."
Tell us everything you know."
I think I'm assuming it was like two-way glass or whatever. So they just think some guy in the 50s, like, yeah, man, I'm experiencing LSD and I found this awesome chick. No, you did not. So full service sex workers on the CIA payroll were instructed to lure clients back to the safe houses where they were surreptitiously filled with a wide range of substances, including LSD, and monitored.
So we're agreeing that the term safe house is in quotation marks. If you're brought back there and drugged, then it's not safe for everyone.
Well, it was safe for the CIA that was behind one-way glass.
Right.
So the sex workers were instructed in the use of post-coital questioning to investigate whether the victims, right? Oh, is that good for you? Yeah, man. Boy, that sex was like, I don't know, like secret plans for a satellite or something.
Do you happen to have blueprints hidden in any of your orifices?
Oh, yeah. Give it to me like a secret rocket that you have plans in your briefcase that I can read. So they hired these sex workers.
So this was a test. So they didn't have any reason to believe these guys actually had any special knowledge. Right?
Well, we're going to get into that. I think the general thing was just like they hired sex workers to go out and pretend to not be prostitutes like on a street corner, but pretend to just be women. So these guys think, oh man, I'm talking up this cute girl and we're going to go back to her place or whatever. And then really wanted to try get them on LSD and see if they could get them to reveal like secrets. Jesus. And then the plan was if this was going to work, well, then we're going to go out and target, we're going to try to find, oh, that guy, works at the Russian embassy or whatever. And let's go send some prostitutes to drug him up and get him to tell us secrets. So the sex workers were instructed to use post-coital questioning to investigate whether the victims could be convinced to involuntarily reveal secrets. The victims were sometimes.
You would think that like you go back with a prostitute and then all of a sudden everything's in like triplicates and like fucking there's trails on the edge of every light. You think you'd be like, I think you drugged me and I might leave. This is not really what I signed up for.
Well, I don't know, man. It might be like, hey, I met this chick and now we're doing LSD. What a trip. Nuts. I barely remember it. And now
I get that she told the guy, but it sounds like they're slipping it in their drink or something.
Yeah, I think there's some of that. But I think some of it was like, it's in the late 50s and 60s. So it's like, hey, come back to my place and we'll party. And so she comes back like, want to try some drugs? Yeah, this guy's going to say whatever he thinks he's going to get laid. So he's going to say, yeah, sure.
Right.
And then before you know it, so the victims were sometimes fed subliminal messages in attempts to induce them to involuntary actions, including criminal activity such as robbery, assault, and assassination. So they were like,
so they're Manchurian candidate-ing fucking Johns. Like,
yes, that's what they were trying to get them to do. So it wasn't just like a one night, like get this guy to tell us his, bank password or whatever, but like, no, get this guy like, oh, we're all drugged up and let's go commit a crime, or whatever. Many of the CIA
started small. It was like, go 2 minutes over on the parking meter. And he was like, must go 2 minutes over on parking meter. Oh my God, what is happening?
Don't return that library book. And then before he knows it, he's got like a high-powered rifle with a scope on a roof or whatever.
It's like, it made more sense when it was the library book. This seems a bit much.
Well, Many of the CIA operatives involved in the experiments voluntarily indulged in the drugs and sex workers for recreational purposes.
See, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, fucking hot woman brings a guy back and is like, "Hey, take these pills. I'm not gonna tell you what they are." And the guy's like, "Okay,
Yeah.
sure. We're having sex, right?"
Um, and then I love also the CIA guys behind the glass were like, "Hey, maybe we should go get in on some of this," and they just like did some drugs and got laid.
I mean,
And
they were
we'll
probably
fill out
humping. They're probably humping the glass. I assume.
right.
Yeah.
So every one of these acts was blatantly illegal, and several significant operational techniques were developed in this theater, including extensive research into sexual blackmail, surveillance technology, and the possible use of mind-altering drugs in field operations, Charles Manson, and the Operation Midnight Climax program was soon expanded, and CIA operatives began dosing people in restaurants, bars, and beaches.
What did that achieve for them?
Getting people high at the beach and then just being like, "Hey, man, give us this secret." Like, I guess they're just like,
"Give us the secret to your rockin' bod." Like, what secrets?
"Give us your surfboards, man. Come on."
Can you imagine these meetings? They were like, "So we're making progress. We got a guy to give us his sandals. We're not sure that we can like ramp that up to give us the top secret nuclear codes, but we think we could get as far as give us your hat."
We're very close to getting a skateboard. Let's just say that's where we're at. And this guy's beach cooler that has beer in it. So we're really working this guy.
We did get a guy to flick another guy's ear for like no reason. Like he didn't even know what was happening.
And we got this guy to shoplift some potato chips while he was high because we all had the munchies. The Operation Midnight Climax program was soon expanded. I did that part. Restaurants, bars, and beaches. The extent to which the widespread exposure of the public mind-altering drugs continued to the rise of the counterculture movement in the late 50s and 60s is unknown, because this is Wikipedia. But like, wait a minute. They just started dosing people at bars and restaurants and beaches in San Francisco. And then it was in the 60s is when the counterculture movement started and the free love movement started in San Francisco, where the CIA was just illegally dosing people unknowingly.
So they were like, "Shit, this is the wrong impact. People are talking about loving each other. Abort.
Report. We can't get them to commit crimes. They want to dance and love and body paint. Like,
they're dancing, and all of a sudden they've dropped their hatred.
Oh, they're putting flowers in guns. We gotta stop this right now."
This guy who was a clear racist walking into the bar now likes a black person. Shit.
Everyone's getting along.
Fucked.
What the fuck have you guys done? Although Ken Keeney has attributed his role in the genesis of the influential San Francisco Bay Area psychedelic social scene that developed in the 60s to his participation in Project MKUltra experiments at the Menlo Park, California VA hospital. The safe houses were dramatically scaled back in 1963 following a report by CIA Inspector General John Ehrman, which strongly recommended closing the facility. The San Francisco safe houses were closed in 1965, and the New York City safe house soon followed in 66. So, okay, there's that tie. In 1974, the journalist Seymour Hersh exposed the CIA's illegal spying on the U.S. citizens and how the CIA had conducted non-consensual drug experiments. His report stated the lengthy process of bringing long suppressed details about MKUltra to light. Project MKUltra came to light in the spring of 77 during a wide-ranging survey of the CIA's Technical Services Division. John K. Vance, a member of the CIA Inspector General's staff, discovered that the agency was running a research project that included administering LSD and other drugs to unwilling human subjects.
So this is why the 60s was great.
Yeah, the CIA helped push it. I mean, I'm sure, like,
there is an argument. I don't know that I necessarily buy it, but there is an argument that the counterculture movement was fairly political and became fairly political. And then if you could get people to kind of just go off into a drug-induced haze and like, you know, go, hey, if we just, you know, love each other and we need to stop, you know, fighting back kind of thing, like putting anger into the world. And so they go off and yeah, sure, they have orgies and things, and but they stop being that political. So there's an argument that it did kind of further their cause. I don't know. Like most of the people that I know who've done LSD, it wasn't like a trick.
I mean, I think there's probably some truth to that to a certain extent, of, like you say, like the early hippies were like radicals. They were activists. There was, and I think the turning everything into a free love party did get some people to just sort of check out and not be like super big activists or whatever. And I'm sure they kind of took some of the data from Operation Midnight Climax and went, I'm sure part of that got infused in there when they saw the results of like, oh God, everyone's just throwing down. They're like, well, this isn't good to get secrets from people, but oh, we can just sort of infiltrate this. Another way to infiltrate a movement is to get everybody to just, you know, want to just.
Well, I'd like to be the first to say I think they should do it again, because I think everyone should be dosed and we should love each other.
Yeah, I would just, I mean, I'm just like, let's make the food supply a little healthier. It'd be my first go. That's where I'd go. But, you know, if you want to do that, that's fine.
And invent large scale wave machines.
Large scale wave machines. Yeah. So yeah, that's Government Secrets. Second segment, Operation Midnight Climax, CIA drug boners. Folks, support the show at labirapay.com/government secrets. Kate, can you put that in the chat? I'll put it on the screen. We just started that, so you can support the show.
It's like, spell it like liberate, but put pay instead of the TE.
Yes.
I think.
Libirapay. Liberapay. .com/government secrets.
And the reason we're doing that is because instead of Patreon is twofold. One, because Patreon fucked me in the past, and two, because Patreon takes a crazy cut. So
they do take a big chunk. I have not been screwed over by a Patreon, but you have. Whitney Webb has been on the show to talk about 6 months ago. She got screwed over, or maybe more, by Patreon. Other people have been, you know, they've become a big tech company. They're worth billions of dollars. And so they do take a huge chunk. So that's why, I mean, I still have a Patreon, but I prefer people to use Rockfin. But if you want to support this show, you want to directly support Government Secrets, go to this. It's on the page right there. And hit the like button and subscribe. And if you're listening to this on, you know, iTunes or whatever, Spotify, give it a positive review, and share it and spread the word on it, because we've been doing the show a little over a year now and it's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Keep the show going, man.
Yeah, dude. And you know, at some point,
all my stuff's at radindiemedia.com with tons of other stuff. We put up Graham's stuff and Jimmy's stuff, and it's all at radindiemedia.com. I hope people will check it out almost every day. And Redacted Tonight and everything else, if you don't see it at Rad Indie Media, go to leecamp.com.
Yeah, get everything at grahamelwood.com, everybody. You can go to rockfin.com/Graham Elwood to support my show and Lee's show and all that stuff. And of course, I have a PayPal and a Venmo and all these other ways, because I've been demonetized by YouTube for 8 months. So support what we do, everybody. Thank you so much. I guess that's it, right, buddy?
That's it for our ongoing quest to ruin American history.
To make people, if you had any sort of like America's not, it's not perfect, but nope, not we're gonna crush that. We're gonna really take that out of you.
We're gonna beat that out of you, yeah.
All right, buddy. Well, good to see you, man.
Thanks, man. Talk to you soon.
Later.